amongst us hasn't thought, if only I had more motivation and willpower? Why can't I find the precise scientific plan for me? I used to beat myself up saying both these things only to realize years later that they were the very expectations causing me to gain weight. Why? Because while both are achievable, they are not reasonable. When I turned both from achievable to reasonable goals, I started losing weight with an ease I didn't know was possible. Let's start with willpower and motivation. Here's what my motivation looked like in every failed weight loss attempt. To start, there's nothing like the thrill of a promising new weight loss plan. I'd set up my habit app, play Tetris in my calendar to fit in my new habits, and buy shiny new gadgets to start on my awesome plan. My motivation would shoot from 0 to 100. All of this prep felt worth it because I was actually doing the plan. Eat right? Check. Exercise? Check. Weight loss? Check. Saying no to temptations felt surprisingly easy. I wasn't even as hungry, clearly a reasonable plan. But as a month goes by, temptations start becoming harder to resist. I start feeling hungrier. After work, it's hard to pick going to the gym instead of going home to a cozy night of pizza and TV. I'm still on the wagon, but the plan is starting to take more effort than the glorious first month, which means I'm no longer meeting my targets every day. But my expectation is to meet it every day. So every time I don't meet it, I get stern with myself and willpower my motivation up. I'd almost punish myself by eating even less or exercising even more than what my plan required. But then my motivation would stay up for a short period of time, then plummet. Until finally, I'd fall completely off the wagon. And because I'm so burnt out from willpowering my motivation, I'd stay off the wagon for a while, until I step on the scale one random day and shock myself with how much weight I've gained. Then we're back to square one. I lost control of the situation at 3 critical moments, all because I confused achievable for reasonable. Was it achievable to stick to the plan? Yes, I did it, so clearly it's achievable. Was it achievable to get back to my plan after a slip? Yup. But were any of those reasonable? The end result of being so burnt out that I gained weight for months says absolutely not. Now let's flip these 3 moments from achievable to reasonable. When I created the plan, I should have accepted that the novelty will wear off, causing my motivation to dip and sticking to plan becoming harder. This is natural. What is unnatural is expecting my motivation to be sky high all the time. Even with your boss, teacher, or mom hounding you, when have you been 100% on track 100% of the time for anything? So instead of fighting dips in motivation with trash talking myself and punishing myself next day with starvation or extreme exercise, the reasonable thing is to accept and plan for motivation dips. Here's how. On days you feel drawn to skip things but you can see yourself doing a quick thing, select the low motivation plan. For eating, this is hitting your maintenance calorie target or TDE and forgetting about macros and whole foods for that day. For workouts, it's walking in your home even if it's just 2 minutes. And on days you aren't confident you can do even a quick thing, select the no motivation plan. For food, skip tracking and pick a speed bump that slows your eating down. Pick one for before eating, like drinking 1 glass of water first before having each meal, and pick one for during eating, like using a small bowl and sitting at least 3 feet away from the big containers of food. So you have to get up to get more servings, allowing you time to connect with your satiety. Workouts, you can skip them altogether. But what about if you slip off the no motivation plan? You're totally off the wagon. This will happen at the start when you're still learning how to accurately gauge your motivation level each day. Accept it for what it is instead of what you think it should be, and pick the right plan. When this happens, track your time to recovery and focus on getting your time to recovery to be shorter and shorter by becoming more aware and accepting of your motivation levels. But what goes into the full plan? Let's think of losing weight like a game of cards. On the flexible end, you need to play just 1 card on every turn, meaning you only need to pay attention to one thing. Like for me, it was replacing my daily 3 to 5 cans of soda with water. While on the rigid end, you need to play many cards on every turn. For example, to be successful at keto, it's not enough to eat lots of fat. You also need to reduce carbs to less than 5% of your calories, have no more than 25% of your calories come from protein, and ideally measure your ketone levels to ensure you're actually in ketosis day after day. And to meet such precise macros, you end up having to cook a lot more than on, say, intermittent fasting, where you can eat anything you like as long as it's within your eating window. Let's also say you need to exchange chips to get carbs. Think of chips as your effort. So on the flexible end, you exchange just 1 chip every day. While on the rigid end, you have to exchange many chips every day. There are 3 strategy mistakes I see in this game. First, on the flexible end, even though the default number of carbs to play is less, I see people make it harder. For example, in intermittent fasting, collapsing the eating window from 8 hours a day to every other day. Now you have to exchange more and more chips daily, which is harder to do consistently than exchanging one chip a day. This causes burnout and falling off the wagon even on flexible plans. The second mistake happens when you get stuck in your weight loss, which will happen no matter which method you choose, and even if you play the least cards possible for that method. After all, this is what weight loss looks like on every method. At this point, you need to know which new card will get you out of your weight loss plateau. The problem is knowing the deck of cards well enough, meaning knowing the science of weight loss and your body patterns well enough to identify this new card to play. Typically, people go harder on the card they were already playing and fall deeper into mistake one. And when you don't identify the new card correctly, thus remaining stuck, you still see the testimonials for that method. So you conclude that that method doesn't work for you specifically. This is what causes people to move up the spectrum toward more and more rigid methods. The rigidness feels necessary for two reasons. One, if there was a loss in trust in the more flexible method, then our instinctive belief in no pain, no gain makes us think that a more rigid, structured plan will fix the problem. And second, if you lost trust in yourself because you burnt out while seeing weight loss, then more structure and constraints feel mentally safer. Like the rigidity will force you to become the disciplined person you want to be. But then because you're playing a lot more cards, you circle back to mistake one, burn out, and fall off the wagon. Or if you're able to stay on the wagon, eventually your weight loss will get stuck. And because you're playing so many cards in the deck already, you're backed into a corner with hardly any new cards left to play, which then leads back to problem two. And with every repeat of this vicious cycle, you end up moving further and further up toward the rigid end, desperate and confused as to why weight loss is so hard for you. I've coached more than 800 people, and the only way I've seen people win this game for life is to adopt this three-part strategy. Part 1, start with a method on the flexible end of the spectrum that's also reasonable for you. For example, intermittent fasting is more flexible than calorie counting, but may feel unreasonable because you want to eat all of your meals with your family. So you may move up the spectrum and pick another method instead, and then play the minimum cards for that method. I typically recommend starting with calorie counting and aiming for a 11 to 15% deficit from your TDE or maintenance calories on average over a week. The day-to-day doesn't matter. Part 2 is to track the effect of your chosen method. This maps to tracking 3 categories: your size, actions, and reactions. For size, every 7 days, don't track just weight, but split weight into fat versus lean mass and track changes to each. Because ultimately, you want fat loss, not weight loss. Use the body fat calculator linked in the description below to do this. In actions, track how closely you met the targets for your chosen method. And in reactions, track hunger, cravings, sleep, period, and if you had a larger or more carb or sodium heavy meal than typical the day before your weigh-in. As you track this every 7 days, spot patterns to execute part 3 of this strategy. Tweaks to make weight loss easier and consistent, aka more and more reasonable. I don't have your data in front of me to give personalized advice, but here are the 8 most common patterns I see that you can watch out for in your data. I didn't lose any weight, but that's because I gained lean mass while losing fat. So this method is actually working. Don't change anything. I'm meeting targets and losing a sustainable 1% body weight per week, and yet I'm really hungry within 2 to 3 hours of my last meal. So I'll borrow one card from macro counting. Add 15 to 20 grams of protein to that one meal of the day. My waist and hip changed in opposite directions, so I'm likely bloated. I should ignore this week's data. My fat went up and lean mass went down. My body is stressed. I need to dial up the self-care. Take it easier at work and home, sleep more, go for easy walks instead of full workouts, and maybe even up to maintenance calories for this week. My after-dinner cravings are off the charts. So I will borrow one card from intuitive eating, journal my feelings, and then if I want to eat, I'll eat. Every time I sleep 6 hours, my cravings shoot up, but I'm good when I get 7 hours of sleep. Every time my period is coming up, I get one-off wonky results, so I should just ignore that week. I lost no fat despite nailing my actions, but I also ate out yesterday. So this is probably a one-off wonky result. I should ignore this week's data. As for the inevitable plateaus every 3 to 4 months of consistent weight loss, again, I don't have your data in front of me, so I can only tell you what generally I've seen work, and you can use these as starting points to experiment. You can get this table as a PDF from the link in the description. Or if you'd like me to coach you, check out the 5-minute sneak peek into my program linked in the description and pinned comment below. Now, these 2 changes only scratch the surface. How do you keep your motivation up longer? What role does exercise play in all of this? What if you tend to self-sabotage because of having an unhealthy relationship with food, all or nothing thinking, or other thought patterns? This is why you don't want to ignore this video, which dives way deeper into the A to Z blueprint for setting up your outcomes, actions, and reactions for weight loss for life. It took my co-coach Lucy and I 10 years and $45,000 combined to figure all of this out. So you don't want to miss the complete step-by-step breakdown here. And always remember, you can do it.